Serious, what is it like to have children you don't want? A girl I worked with had a 5-year plan. Get a designer man. Have a massive wedding. Travel to fancy hotels and have a baby. She managed it all except the baby. 2 years of IVF later and still no baby. After a long adoption process they get a 6-month-old. 3 months later they give him back and divorce. She realized that she had only wanted a baby because that's what people did and that meant she was successful. She had never thought about what having a baby meant and what it would do to her reciprocal life. The husband couldn't live with what she had decided, so left. At least the baby went to a couple who did want him eventually, instead of staying with her. My friend had a baby as fast as she could, because that meant she had one life first in our friend group, only to realize that she now has a baby forever. I remember having to stop at my dad's work, the receptionist leading me back to his office, and her gushing about what a great guy he is and what a diligent worker to put in so much overtime. Just listening to this woman fail to realize she was describing an absent father. I had genetic testing done during very early pregnancy to screen for congenital problems and mentioned I would abort if they were present. I had friends severely upset with me about this. I know I couldn't handle a disabled child financially or emotionally. I had to be honest with myself. I was a nanny for a lady who really didn't want children but needed up having 5 because she loved her husband. Each of her pregnancies her medical condition got worse. With her youngest she had to be in the hospital for 2 months because she had so many kidney stones. Part of her condition is she produces kidney stones at a crazy rate. And they are rare stones that have a hook on them. Her kidneys are also more like a sponge looking organ than kidney, that aren't functioning over 25%. She would give her life for those kids even though she never wanted them. Tie part. When the youngest was 2, her health was declining a lot. And her husband left her for a chick he just met because, and I quote, "I'm sick of you being sick. I miss those kids so much and I miss her." She got full custody and has even better insurance now that her ex left her. And he pays huge in child support and alimony every month. I was conceived to replace a baby boy that died. My mom was so disappointed I was a girl. She forgot my name for a while. And now I have 2 middle names. I had a brother growing up who was favored by both my parents. But he really was amazing. He was my favorite too. He died 5 years ago in a motorcycle wreck. And I'm the least favorite. My mom admitted this freely. Also, I am the last remaining child. Also, I don't care that my parents are disappointed that I was the one that survived. I've made myself who I want to be. I only talk to my dad occasionally. And my mom became an alcoholic because 2 of her kids died. I don't talk to her. Shrug. My life is separated from theirs. And I encourage other people to cut off the cancerous people. Even if it's your parents. It's liberating. It set the tone for the rest of my life. One of those hindsight is 20/20 things. I honestly believe if I'd never had a kid, particularly as young and alone as I was in a very socially backwards area, I'd have made a lot more of myself. I know that could be taken as self-rationalization for lack of trying and failures. But I also know how I felt. How I have never bonded with my kid. And how both our lives could have been a lot better had I either waited to have her, or let another couple adopt her like I wanted but was forced out of the choice. I have 3, a girl and twin boys. I really thought I wanted kids because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. Be a wife and have kids. I love them. And I want the best for them. But I don't have the same connection to them that other moms seem to have. I don't miss them when I have to go on a long trip. I just feel relief. Having them home because of the pandemic has been really hard for me. I have a lot of guilt about it. I don't withhold affection or anything. But I'm not a naturally affectionate person. My husband is. I feel pretty lonely and left out when they're playing together. I feel like I don't belong. It's a weird dichotomy. I don't really know. Even though I'm surrounded by family, it feels pretty damn lonely. I don't feel like I belong in my own life. I fantasize about taking off alone and living somewhere by myself. But I don't want to mess them up like that. They're innocent and don't deserve it. So I do my best. And hope I'll be alive in 10 years to be alone again. My mother point blank told us she didn't want children and my father had begged and begged her for me. Then my younger sister was an accident. It's always been an awkward, very strained and very tainted relationship. For a long time I held a ton of resentment and disgust for her. It's made me into what I consider to be a pretty great parent, though I wanted children, and even knowing I'd be giving up sleep and freedoms, I knew I wanted them to know they were wanted, planned for, adored. My dad remarried and adopted 2 children of his second wife's, then they had 1 together, making us a family of 5. Now I get so much in way of a rich childhood for my children, with all their cousins and aunt and uncles to love them. It's not always completely life ruining, I suppose, but it did have a profound effect on how the first half of my life went for sure. I think this is a conversation that more women, especially, should have. You are close to being burnt at the stake if you confess that actually if you could turn back the clock, you wouldn't have children. I feel that these conversations may stop perpetuating this idea that if you're a woman you will automatically adore your children too. You have more options than just having children. Women do also go through things such as PND. And maybe others talking about it won't make them feel so guilty and alienated. It's like having some guests at your house that never get around to leave for years. But you must take care of them to avoid getting into trouble and judged by others. The good old it's like taking care of a drunk midget for 12 years. I know someone who was diagnosed with MS and had 5 kids because each pregnancy her MS got better. She was a terrible mother. No involvement with her kids. Imagine growing up and at some point you figure out you were a medical treatment your mother was using to not have MS episodes. Now this is a taboo subject. People want to say NLSX is taboo. Or drugs. Or that sort of thing. No. This is the kind of topic that is actually taboo in our culture. Good question. My mom just forgot we existed and had another baby to keep her happy. My ex-husband was emotionally abusive and, if I'm being completely honest with myself, forced me into getting pregnant 3 months after going into labor and losing our daughter at 20 weeks. I wasn't ready and I hadn't really had a chance to grieve. He quit his job 3 days into my required maternity leave. So I had to go back to work as soon as physically possible. Our son was 13 weeks early. Spent 2 months in the NICU and cost over $1 million in his first year. Thank goodness for good insurance. Now my son is almost 7. His father hasn't been in the picture for years. And until recently, I was doing it all on my own. My son showed incredible strength to grow big enough to breathe on his own and come home. So I've made it my mission to give him a great life and make sure he never knows that I didn't want to be a parent after my daughter died. My girlfriend had a 2-year-old when I met her. He's 5 now. I didn't plan to have kids. But I love her. I'm pretty much used to it. I teach him stuff and he's attached to my hip when he's here, joint custody with the father. But ideally I'd have preferred to not have a kid around. I can deal though. He can be a little head sometimes, LMAO. Also it's weird disciplining someone else's kid, so I'm just getting there. I can see the betrayal in his eyes. I'm supposed to be like the fun uncle. Getting onto him is weird. I've honestly thought about this question before. My son, 14 months was planned. And he is incredible. Absolutely a light in our lives. On the other hand, I was super ill the entire pregnancy. Depressed and struggling up until a few months ago. Now, this was made worse by 2 moves, military. And COVID of course. But I never ever want to do this again. Not quite the same. But similar. We get so much pressure on the next kid from friends and family. And everyone assumes you'll have more. I absolutely am one and done. At least biologically. I did not enjoy the baby days. And now that he is a toddler, he's amazing. I know 2 would just be above my capacity. and I would regret having another. That being said, my husband and I are both really drawn to fostering, and will likely do so when we are at our final posting location and our kid is a bit older. I read this Reddit story once that I have never been able to forget. It was a confession. I think, can't remember the subreddit. This woman had a kid she didn't want. I can't remember the circumstance of whether it was hers or a dead sibling's. Anyway, she talked about how she felt so guilty for not loving him that she worked extra hard to give him a good life. All her money went toward his education and things he wanted. But the part I can't forget is that she had set an alarm on her phone to go off every day to remind her to tell him that she loved him. Because it didn't come naturally to tell him that, and she was afraid of him not feeling loved. That story is an amazing reminder that love comes in so many forms and looks different for everyone. She doesn't love him, but is so worried about his well-being that she goes to lengths many people with kids would never consider to go to make him feel wanted and happy. That isn't love. I don't know what is. I have kids and I wanted them. But I was an unwanted kid. My mom and non-bio dad married when I was young. He raised me, but I never felt love from him at all. He married her to get her out of a bad situation. I thought he didn't want kids. But when I was about 5/6, my sister was born. He wanted kids. He just didn't want me. I saw how different he was with her and his other kids they had later. Those who have kids that you don't want are very aware on some level. Unwanted kids are a tragedy for everybody involved, including society. I don't have any data to back this up, but I'd be willing to bet every dime I will ever make that prisons aren't filled with people whose emotionally and mentally healthy parents specifically wanted them. Malcolm Gladwell linked the major decrease in crime across the US in the 80s 90s with the legalization of abortion in the 70s. Edited. If you never had a mother, it is very hard to be a mother. Raised by people to whom you were an unwanted burden, an imposition. The child who was always in the way, a person like that, like me, does not know how to love. You know you are supposed to, you see it on TV, in the movies. You read about it in books, but somehow it never happens. If you were born and raised in a place and time where there was no birth control, abortion was illegal and sexual abuse was as common as flies on a piece of rotten meat, a lot of children were not wanted. And then the child became an adult who did not know how to love anything. This is a common enough story. No one likes to hear it, so it does not get told. I think my mom regrets having me. We have a weird relationship. She doesn't like me as a person and wasn't engaged with me as a child. But she did all the stuff she should do. And beyond. She just doesn't like me as a person. She's okay with my older brothers. It's made me very convinced that if you don't want children, you shouldn't have them. It also makes me uneasy when parents judge other parents for not wanting their kids. There's not a good solution. But as an adult, I wish she had just raised me and not tried to fake liking me as a person through my 20s. I love my son. I would die for him. I'd kill for him if I had to. Yet, if I could go back in time and not have children, then I would. I was not prepared for a child. Even though I worked. We planned this pregnancy. I was not prepared for how much I'd lose myself and my whole identity. I was not prepared for the sleep deprivation, the constant screaming, the colic. I think overall I had a very bad experience. I was very sick after having a baby. I will never let my son know this. I will never let my son feel he is unloved or unwanted. It was not his choice to be born. Edit. Okay, wow, I did not expect this to blow up the way it did. To those calling me a good mom, thank you. To those saying I'm a terrible mom, well, I don't care what you say, lol. This is why women do not talk about this kinda stuff and suffer in silence. To anyone really struggling and want to talk to someone who won't give judgment, please DM me. My mom had told me I wish not having kids was normalized back when I was younger. Back then it was just something you did. While I know she loves me, I also know if she could go back and not have kids, she would. This is a perfect example of why it shouldn't be expected that people have children. Man, it's not like I don't want them, let's get that out of the way. Would I have chose a different woman to have children with? Yes. She has a genetic thing that means she will have disabled girls no matter what, and it's a 50/50 whether a boy will be disabled. We didn't know it was her until after our second child. So it goes disabled boy, disabled girl, then a regular normal boy. She booted me to the curb about 2 years ago and I had custody of the kids within 3 months. I've had zero help from her or any of my family or hers. She is off on meth having a blast of a life while I spend every moment changing diapers on an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. Going to therapies and just doing what I thought any dad would do in my situation. I have moments that I hate my life, yeah, but those pass, and then the smiles my littles give me fix it all. Sorry, I know it doesn't fit your question exactly, but I wanted to give a happier response than someone here have. Humans shouldn't reproduce. Being an unloved child is the greatest pain and destructive force a human being can endure. If you don't want a child, use birth control. If you get pregnant anyway, give the child up to an adoptive parent who wants a child to love. I don't want kids, and this is why I get so annoyed at those few people who say stupid like it's different when it's your own, or but if you have one then I'm sure you'd love being a parent. Like, okay. And what if I don't? Oh, telling me I should just have one anyway because I might find it's actually what I want? It's not as if I can return the baby to the baby store if it doesn't work out. It's a person, not an appliance. I'm not willing to gamble a whole new human being's life on, well, it might actually be okay. What a horrible thing to do to a child who never asked to be born. I don't want kids. I never particularly liked them. I'm not mean to them when I'm forced to interact or anything like that. Just don't have whatever paternal instinct everyone else seems to have where they think babies are cute, so I'm just awkward. Seeing how my cousin is with his surprise kids. Even after several years he still is pretty unhappy about not having his own life, and it's hard to watch. My parents pressure me about having kids and that when they're yours it'll be different, but I would never want to risk that. Treating parenthood like a gamble is never a good idea. So, I married a man with 2 kids and we have a daughter together. Totally thought I had it in me to be a stepmom. To make it worse, one kid was a baby when we got together, and so I am more bonded to him, and the other one drives me nuts. I have thought about getting divorced multiple times over it, but when it's me, my husband, and our daughter, it is so nice. I dread when they come and can't wait until they leave. I try to treat them well because it's definitely not their fault. I wouldn't have done if I would have known how ill-equipped I would be. I am just so annoyed all the time. I know I sound like the typical evil stepmom and I wish I didn't. There's just no affection. Especially for the oldest. Thanks for letting me vent this here because I feel like nobody understands. Got a girl pregnant. But she didn't tell me until after she gave birth and gave her up for adoption. I was relieved at first. But it started to me up to know that my own flesh and blood was being raised by another family. I know she's better off. But it still gets to me. I was depressed about it for a long time, but I'm slowly getting over it. I just wish I had the chance to be a father to my kid. I don't want her to grow up wondering why her birth parents didn't want her. I hope her adopted family tells her that it wasn't that I didn't want her. And it was simply the best chance for her to have a great life. Grace. Baby. It's hard. I never wanted kids. I have to. I love them more than anything and do everything I can to make sure they're safe and happy. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. I raided my retirement account to keep up with bills. I sold $60k of stock 2 years ago that's worth almost $200k now. It was a sacrifice to make sure that my kids would have a parent at home. There were times that, if I could have gone back in time and not have kids, I would have. I think. As I'm writing this, it's the first time I wouldn't go back. If I had the chance. Things are better now. Although I'll hit retirement age when my younger child graduates college. My wife is working and made almost as much as I did. About twice what she ever made in the past. Taxpayer funded college would sure help out now. Even if you want kids. Raising them is about the hardest thing you'll ever do. Therapy helped me and my wife. And we also did some couples therapy. Lonely. I'm a knob nurse. See it a lot. Also have a few co-workers in this situation. It's definitely hard being a spectator. One of my co-workers has a granddaughter no one wants and is 2 years old with PTSD due to her entire living situation. When her 13-year-old son got his girlfriend pregnant and my co-worker started talking about it, I naively asked recommended abortion, and now she doesn't talk to me unless I'm the only one around she can vent to. I just don't get it. This kid's life is down the tur already and she's 2. Not fun. I don't recommend it. It isn't fun for the child too. Lol, this turned into neglected redditors. What is your story? My ex told me she couldn't get pregnant and we had 2 kids. Recently divorced. We moved to be close to her parents, 4,000 miles from my home, and now I have to stay here, a place I don't want to be. I love my kids and I would never say I don't want them, or hold it against them, but I left my home, friends and family with the agreement that we would move to my home when they are school age. I miss my home, but I would miss my babies far more. Every reply in this thread. I was the child that wasn't wanted. That wasn't the question. Also, I got pregnant on accident, but now I love being a mom. So, I was a planned, wanted child. And I have had a, mostly, happy life with parents who love me and who I love. But when talking about abortion with my mum, she said that if she'd known how badly I would suffer, I have fairly hefty depression, she wouldn't have had me. That was a hell of a thing to process. I understand what your mom meant. My son has also gone through bouts of depression, AMD, suicidal thoughts, and he is still very young. I often ask myself why I brought kids into a world that causes only pain and suffering. I myself suffer from depression and anxiety, and it kills me that my kid has those same feelings. When my daughter was 1.5 years old, I unexpectedly got pregnant a second time. It was unexpected because I have pretty substantial infertility issues. I was not ready. I was exhausted as from my daughter being a typical toddler and a dog we rescued that needed constant emotional coddling. And hindsight makes it easier to see my depression was wildly out of control, but I didn't realize it because my panic attacks were not. I would lay awake at night, in pain, wanting to vomit from heartburn, exhausted because my daughter decided sleeping through the night was no longer a thing and would think, yeah, no. If I miscarried, I'd probably feel relieved and other things along those lines. And this went on for the whole pregnancy. Right up until 32 weeks when I went into labor. And my son was dead. Gone for at least 3 days before I went into labor. Despite all the expected mental anguish and trauma. For just one single moment when we were driving home with empty arms and an empty car seat, I felt relieved. I have yet to forgive myself for that. One of my childhood friends has a daughter that's about 6 or 7 now. The friend recently confided to me that the kid was a result of a failed plan B. And by the time she realized that, her window of opportunity for abortion had closed. The friend lives with her parents. She's 30. A struggling massage therapist, especially since the pandemic, and makes it very clear that she resents her child. I believe the grandparents have done most of the raising of her kid. It makes me so sad to witness. Because this friend used to be so free-spirited and this kid is dragging her down mentally and emotionally. Jesus. I feel worse for the kid, to be honest.